Hi, hello, I hope you're doing well. I'm Corolla on socials. I'm at From Corolla. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all of my 2025 planners and journals, the systems that I used that worked for me. I'm also going to touch on the systems that I used that may not have worked so well. And I'll talk about the learnings that I took from this year and applied them into my 2026 lineup. This video is all about my 2025 books, and my next one it will be about my 2026 lineup. So I hope you enjoy. Setting my other books aside, I'm first going to talk about the planners that I used in 2025. So for me, generally, I use one or two planners to keep myself productive, organized, intentional in terms of what I want to get done every week, every day, every week, every month, and so on. And just to be clear about my situation, because as we sort of approach our planning system every year, I always like to be mindful that everyone's situation can be unique to them, and the books should reflect that situation, and they should help you, not hinder you, in terms of keeping yourself organized and mindful of staying on top of your tasks and schedules. So my personal situation is that I'm a full-time mom and I have a creative side hustle, if you want to call it that, or a side job of content creating and freelancing or partnering with brands. And I also do workshops and other sort of things. But overall, my planning system is based on coordinating my family appointments and schedules. And usually my yearly planning will be dictated by my kids' school schedules as well as all the activities that they're part of. So keeping that in mind, I don't like to have a digital calendar. I don't like to be on my phone more than I have to be, which is a lot already. So for me, analog planning is really the way to go. And as a stationery enthusiast, I love that. I love that I can use different types of planners, different systems to keep myself organized, as well as stationery tools like fountain pens and nice pens to sort of have that aesthetic element to my books. So that being said, the two planners that I used this year, or most of the year, I guess, is the Plotter A5. This has kept me organized and productive all year long. It is such a great size for me. I found that it has so much space to plan and keep myself organized, and also, have that extra space to include notes and other thoughts, other things that I sort of need to keep in mind, reference notes as well. And the way I sort of use the Plotter A5 is as a desk planner. And so it sits on my desk all day. I don't carry this around too much, even around the house. I like to have it open on my desk and see a weekly view of what needs to be done in terms of deadlines and also schedules. Like I said, I have kids, and so I need to see all the things that their week looks like as well. And for that, I have my Plotter A5. But in terms of portability, being able to carry it around the house or outside of the house, on the go, especially if I'm traveling or on a trip, or on vacation, I like to use, or I have enjoyed using, the Hobonichi weeks. And this has kept me quite organized in terms of, having everything on hand that I need to have, and being able to plan accordingly. So I'm going to do a quick flip through of some of the layouts just to give you an idea of maybe what it looked like. And hopefully that helps, but I won't show you everything, of course, because I do find that planning and journaling is very personal, especially to me, And so I'll show you some examples. So my archive solution for this year for the plotter is just a regular A5 binder that I got off of Amazon. It's nothing special, and I don't know if I'm going to do this year over year because historically I have not kept my planners. After a year or two of having it on the shelf, I usually recycle them. And so I plan on kind of doing the same with my plotter sheets, just because I don't really look at my planner pages after the year is over. I just don't feel the need to do that, because I do have my journals and books that I archive. And so my planner tends to go in the recycling bin. But in terms of how I sort of use it, I did want to show a spread or two. Let me show you a weekly spread. And this is kind of what it looks like, especially in a busy week. So I do have schedules on the left-hand side, and then I usually have things that are really important, priority items that have to get done usually on that day. So they kind of correspond to the day. And then on the right-hand side, where it's not really indicated by day, but there is sort of a line that lines, the boxes up with each day. I usually kind of put in creative projects I'm working on or deadlines that I have to meet on the side. And it's kind of a great way of organizing. Like if I kind of look at this on my desk, it helps me organize my thoughts around what are priority items for this week by day, and also what are some of the projects I'm working on. And so this is a typical sort of weekly layout in my plotter. And the monthlies, I keep all of the months in the plotter, so that way I can future plan for upcoming months in terms of deadlines and things that I have to keep in mind. And for the weekly spreads, I keep just the current month. And so that way I can future plan in the weekly spreads, but it sort of keeps me on target in terms of just planning for the current month and staying organized that way. And then the other thing I do have in my planner or plotter is this notebook, the Hobonichi supplement notebook. And I keep that in the back with one of the adhesive pockets from Traveler's Company. That sticks well to my cover, I find. And everything else is sort of, notes and references, things that I sort of want to keep along with my weekly tasks. And that's my plotter. So that has helped me to stay organized and just on task all year. Whether or not I'm using it consistently week over week just depends on how busy I am with other things, and also how often I can get to my desk. So usually everything that is captured in my plotter is also in my weeks. So definitely all the schedules, appointments, and events. And then usually what I am able to keep, and I'll show you a quick example of a month. This is what a typical monthly spread in my weeks would look like. I do have a post-it that I keep here that's just a monthly review of things. So every month I go back and I sort of review things, hobby related or health related, things like that. So schedules are here. In the weekly, I also have schedules, and then I keep a running list of weekly to-dos. So this is my weekly log. If you're into bullet journaling, I use the Alistair method for when during the week when I would like to have that task done, if I wanted to get it done on a certain day. If not, then I just list it, and whenever I get it done, I just draw a line starting from that day and then exit off like in typical bullet journal fashion. And anything that I move or migrate into the next week has a symbol to show that. So that's a typical sort of weekly layout. And the notes section in the weeks I use for daily planning. So this is my daily log. Also, again, just pen to paper. It's more functional for me than aesthetic. So I don't like to really I don't really like to decorate my planner pages just because I just want the focus to be on keeping myself organized and productive during that week, not necessarily showing it off or, yeah, like these pages don't make it into social because there's nothing to see here. It's just, functional planning for me. So this keeps me on target, and this keeps me grounded and focused on what needs to get done. So the exciting part of my lineup tends to be my journals because, again, for planning, I'm very straightforward. I have one or two planners, and usually it's because I want to catch all and also some sort of portability. And so that's how I approach my planning. For journaling, it's kind of just, all's fair. Anything I feel creatively drawn towards, I will try it out, and some things stick, some things don't. And so the one thing that has stuck for at least 2 years, I guess, by the end of this year, would be the Hobonichi 5-year Techo. This is the A5. So this is the A5, and I use it as an archive of all of the events or all the things that sort of happen throughout the day. And the idea behind the A5, behind the 5-year, is that I want this to become a kind of book or document that I can pass on to my kids. And so one day they can kind of rifle through 5 years or maybe more of things that happened throughout the day in, that involves our family. And again, it's just kind of, just pen to paper. I actually use a fountain pen. And so this is what a typical sort of day is like. And I do like the A5 size because sometimes there's just a lot to say about what happens during a day, especially if it covers, things that happen for me, for my kids, for my husband. So that's how I sort of use this. And I have a stamp that I use to just indicate the weather for the day. And then I use a fountain pen and just write. It's basically an archive. So I just write down the events of the day. And I don't include my personal thoughts, maybe, just my sort of reaction to things, but not like personal journaling. That's not what this book is for. I do just use it as an archive of events that happened. The other 5-year that I almost forgot to include in my lineup because I had it sitting on my desk is the Hobonichi A6 5-year. And I've been using this for 4 years now. And so this is my 4th year in this. And next year will be my last year in it. I'm still kind of debating whether I want to continue this into 2026, just because I started this 5-year as a gratitude practice. So it was just a space for me to remember to go in every day and list at least one thing that I was grateful for. And I started that as an experiment to see if I could keep that up and make it a habit. And I found that I could do it. The only times I didn't go in here every day was if I was on vacation or on a trip, or if it was really super busy or something like that. But for the most part, I did fill out pretty much every day. So every page. And I loved kind of going back and reading the things that sort of stood out to me every day. And so this year is the 4th year, and in 2023, I actually sort of transitioned to looking at each day with little joys. And I got the today's little joys phrase from Morgan Harper Nichols, who's a very talented musician, artist, writer. And she sort of denotes today's little joys just as a way of looking at a day filled with little highlights, little moments that bring us joy and make us happy. And they sort of build up to a happy and joyful life. And so I started denoting today's little joys more of just little moments that made me smile, made me laugh, instead of, just these big moments of gratitude. And sometimes they would be things I was grateful for. Most of the time, it was just little things that, made me smile, and that I really appreciated about that day. And the other thing I did here was I would take a glass dip pen or a nib, a dip pen, and I would just doodle or sketch a floral drawing, and using fountain pen ink. And this was just a way of keeping up a daily practice of drawing for me, just to make sure that, I was practicing using a dip pen, drawing florals, and yeah, that sort of helped me keep up just a little bit of art every day as well. Even if I didn't have time, this would take me like 30 seconds to fill in, to write something and to draw something. And so I really enjoyed doing that. And so that's the Hobonichi A6 5-year, as well as the A5 5-year. And then I can talk about my stream of consciousness writing. And so a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And one of the practices in that book was, to get out of this creative rut is to write, 3 pages every morning of just unfiltered thoughts. So anything that sort of came to mind, you put it down on paper. And that's sort of meant to, help process your thoughts, but also just to get those thoughts out of your mind so it's not rumbling around in there, and distracting you from being a creative person. And a lot of times I do have, the consistent sort of worries and things that are on my mind that I don't really want to spend a lot of time thinking about, because I do want to think about, pushing myself creatively and doing creative projects. And so I started doing the stream of consciousness journaling, is how I sort of denote it. And I use different various notebooks for that. For this year, I started with a Sterling Ink B6 notebook, and it has Tomoe River paper. And I'm not going to flip through too much of it because it is, private thoughts, and just random sort of things. And the idea behind these books or stream of consciousness writing is that I'm not going to flip back and read them. They're not personal journals where I'm talking about highlights of the day or things like that. These are definitely just spaces where I'm just, blurting out things, writing them down, and then getting rid of these books at some point. So that's how I that's how I use this notebook. And I did have a few pages that were blank that were left over, but I decided to jump into a Midori lined notebook. And this is an A5 lined notebook. I'm typically not a lined person. Like, I don't really like to use lined notebooks, except for when I'm doing this kind of writing exercise where I don't have to focus on writing in a straight line, which I can't do for the life of me. And I just find writing on lined paper helps me just not focus on, whether or not I'm writing, in a straight line. But it just helps me sort of focus instead on just getting those thoughts out there and just writing. So that writing experience. And I use fountain pens for stream of consciousness journaling. And I did find that I wasn't super happy with Tomoe River paper this year. I think a lot of people sort of experienced inconsistencies in their paper. And even though this notebook, the Sterling Ink notebook, handled fountain pens really, really well, as it would, because I've used TRP for a while now, and I do enjoy the experience with fountain pens. I wanted to try different type of paper just to see, if there was something else out there that I would really enjoy writing on. And I found that I fell in love with Midori paper. I've used it before, but it was never my primary paper that I used, just because it's a cream color. And I was always sort of a stark white paper person until I used this paper consistently. And every day I would just, go in here. I actually started using this in, let's see, September. So I started using this notebook in September. And for the last, few months that I've used this notebook, I've really, really enjoyed the Midori cream paper. And so I feel like moving forward, I will just keep getting these Midori lined notebooks and, building my stack of notebooks that way. And I don't feel so bad about recycling these notebooks just because, I'm using them for the purpose they're meant to be. And they're just, simple, aesthetically, nice. I've added a sticker, but I don't have to. And I kind of use it for the purpose that they're meant to be. So that is the stream of consciousness. I'm going to say this is sort of like one book just because I could have continued with this notebook for a little bit longer, but I ran out of space basically. So I jumped into the Midori, and that has been going really well for me. That is a practice I will always continue as far as I know. Okay, now we get into the other kinds of journals. So memory keeping, hobby-related journaling, and personal journaling, I guess. So my main two journals, I would say, have been my memory keeper, which is the Hobonichi Weeks, and also the Sterling Ink N2, which is also the week size. And for any sort of spillover journaling, I would call it, I think, I used the TN Passport, and I also used a TN or Traveler's Notebook standard size. And so let's talk about these two first before I go into my spillover journals. My memory keeper, I basically use this as an artistic or aesthetic kind of journal. And what this captures is just highlights that I want to look back on. And I use a lot of stickers and washi and just sort of fun add-ons. So in the monthly spread, I usually put in my workouts or, things I sort of do for my health. And then also any highlights or things that stood out for me, most of the time that are related to my kids. So that way I can sort of look back on a monthly overview of just, the things that stood out to me during that month. In the weekly spreads, I basically use, again, stickers, stamps, acrylic stamps, and then also just a gel pen and a Tombow Funinosuke for hand lettering. So usually it's just one or two sort of highlights of the day. I don't write down everything. It's more so quick glance of things that stood out in a day, and accompanied by stickers and other things that I can show off. In the notes section, it was usually like what I used this for was if I went on a trip or I had a lot more to say about a day that I wanted to document or remember, I would add that in the notes. So not a lot of pages that I used here, but I did like that there was the option of going into the notes section and adding more, especially if I didn't have space in the weekly section. So that's how I use that. And then in the back, there's those extra pages in the Hobonichi Weeks where you can put, your fave, top 100, things like that. So for me, I'm going to fill this out when the year is done and just go through and write down like my favorite shows, favorite books, podcasts, maybe things like that. So I already wrote Department Q just because it was so good. I didn't want to forget that. So I will fill this out at the end of the year, and then I probably will use this for something. I do kind of like reflecting on the year at the end. So in December, I usually reflect on how the year went and write down a few things that I want to highlight from that year. And in January, I kind of close off these books, these memory keepers, and put them on my shelf. And so, December and January are kind of those months where I fill out any reflection pages or anything that overlooks the whole year, sort of a yearly overview type thing. The second kind of personal journal or tracker is the Sterling Ink N2. And I use this for hobbies related journaling and tracking. And how I basically used it was the yearly tracker. I just used the small or the tiny icons from the Coffee Monsters Co. To denote like when I started a new book or when I bought a fountain pen or when I got a new ink. I kind of dropped off here, as you can tell, in August because I definitely got more pens and inks and read books, but I didn't really want to keep using the tiny icons in this way. I might backfill it, I don't know, because I do kind of just like how this looks, but I may not. I don't know. I don't know if it's important to me. And then the quarterly breakdown. How I use these spreads was for reading. So I tracked the books that I was reading, audiobooks, anything like that. And just when I start and finish a book. And then in pencil, I would just keep a tally of the books that I finished. And at the end of the month, I would just write in a brush pen the total number of books. And so that's how I've been using the quarterly. And I kind of like seeing, quarter over quarter or month over month too, the kind of books I'm reading. In the monthly spread, I didn't use it for any kind of monthly tracking, except that I was tracking the pens that or the fountain pens that I was inking up. So after I inked up a fountain pen, I would just quickly write down what the ink was, what pen it was, what nib it has in. And on the left-hand side, I wrote down any new inks or pens that I acquired with a little swatch if it was a new ink. And then also sometimes there was something notable about that month, so I would just write that down as well, so that at the end of the month, what I usually do is a review of where I stand in terms of fountain pens and fountain pen inks. And I just kind of like doing that month over month. And so this would help me just in terms of what I did acquire, what I used probably the most that month. The weekly spreads, I didn't use too much, but some of the weeks I did some swatches to figure out if I wanted to ink up my pens with those inks. I also, made notes if I did a Twitch stream or I started reading a book. Some things I might have acquired in terms of stationery and things like that. But I wasn't very consistent. And so I do have some blank weeks here. So that is a learning that I took into 2026. In the notes section, I did carry this around if I went to a pen show or a stationery event, or if I went to a meetup with friends. And so in the notes section, I would sample pens, inks, and in this case, I was just trying out different nibs that Gina had available at the Portland or PNW pen show. And yeah, I kind of just like documenting the different type of nibs and pens that I used, just because sometimes, I would go back and reference the type of nibs that I was drawn to and have an example of that. So that's how I used the notes section, and basically how I used this notebook or this planner for hobbies related tracking and journaling. And the spillover notebooks, I'm going to go through quickly. This is the TN passport size, and this I just use for personal journaling. So I threw this into a traveler's notebook, and it was great because I could actually take this with me outside of the house. So if I was traveling, and just jot down, thoughts and reflections that way. And so I used that for a few months, but this I used throughout the year for ephemera and happy mail, just because you can see how chunky it is, and trying to fit that into, a memory keeper. First of all, postcards and things like that wouldn't fit into a Hobonichi week size notebook. And so I kind of did find that the standard size notebook or insert was great for postcards, stickers, things that were a little bit bulky. But I did want to I wanted to keep them, right? Like I do love keeping ephemera and things that people send me and that I collect throughout the year. So an example of something like this in terms of mail is, if I get like a card, a business card or a postcard, journaling card, as part of a package, I would throw that in here, or if they have stickers or things like that. And use like other collaging materials that I have and just make it look a little bit nicer, add a little bit of thought or context to what that page is about, or what that mail sort of is about. And so I did this throughout the year, and I love how chunky it is, and I like that it's kind of contained somewhere. And so this I would just shelve along with my memory keeper, and it worked really well that way. So a few more things to note, or just to mention, I guess. Honorable mention in terms of journaling are my 2 travel journals. This one in the Kyoto cover is my family travel journal. And so if I travel with my kids and my husband, then I would print out photos and just kind of collage our experience in terms of the travels that we went on. And the reason why I don't technically count these as part of my 2026 lineup is that this is not timely based. So, I just keep using them until the insert is full, and then I throw in a new insert and continue using it. So it's not bound to a certain year or a certain timeline. The other insert that I have in here is the accordion file, or the accordion insert. I won't show you the details of each page, but how I used it is every month I would print out a photo or a few photos, and that kind of like highlighted that month for me for whatever reason. And I would just collage and write a little bit about it. And it's family related, and so that's why it sort of sits in this cover. And then the other travel journal is a solo trip cover. So this is the airlines cover. The insert is the California insert. And this is solo trips that I took. So this would be all like pen shows or stationary events, things like that. And I print out, the photos that I take, selfies or of friends, and include, washi or stationery that I acquired on the trip. And again, I'm almost done this insert, so I'll just throw in a new one once I'm done. And this will carry me through, year over year. And then in the back, the insert I have is just for stamping. And it's great because I could take this on trips if I want to, just to capture, stamps or other things on my travels. In terms of planning, I did want to mention a caveat. So, as I mentioned before, my personal situation in terms of planning is dictated by my kids' schedules. And so I have to take into account when they're in school, when they're out of school, because that's how we sort of plan activities and the programs that they're part of. And so I find that July and August, which is when my kids are on summer vacation, they don't have school. And in those 2 months, I just can't keep up with my plotter A5, mostly because I'm not at my desk a lot. Like, I'm not spending most of my day near my desk. I'm usually out and about with my kids. And I found that I needed a solution, especially for those 2 months, because trying to keep up with an A5 that I couldn't really carry around with me just felt like a lot. And so for July and August this year, I downsized to a traveler's notebook in the passport size. And that worked out really, really well for me. And so I actually accompanied the passport with a Wonderland 222 A6 notebook. And their notebooks, at least this is from a couple years ago, I think. So it uses Tomoe River paper, but the OG Machine 9. So it's not OG, but it's pre-Sanzen Machine 9. The paper is okay. Like, it's not the OG that everyone loves and wishes would come back, but will never come back. But Machine 9 TRP is pretty good. And it didn't have, the inconsistencies that I found that Sanzen dealt with this year. And again, using the Alistair method and just bullet journaling a week's worth of tasks, so my weekly log and then my daily log, and just dating, the day, putting down my schedule, and also sort of rapid logging what happened during the day. That way I can kind of have these things, at my fingertips, and I don't have to reach too far for them. Using the Traveler's Notebook passport size with the weekly insert, especially for July and August, kept me really organized. And I'm not going to show you any of the spreads just because it is just literally pen to paper, all the appointments and schedules. And so that was the first insert. I also have a plain insert that I was using for personal journaling or notes on the go. And so if we were leaving the house, I could just grab this and I could have the schedules and appointments. I could have a personal notebook for just thoughts and reflections or things I had to remember, notes wise. And then I also made a little notebook using some of the leftover pages in my Sterling Ink Passport notebook from 2024. So I didn't use all of the notes pages in the back, and I didn't want to waste them all. And so I just tore them out and I just added a cover, or sort of a cardstock cover from the Coffee Monsters Co., glued it all together, and it doesn't look perfect, but it did its trick. It did its job. And so basically how I used this was just kind of a daily, I have this timeline washi from Sterling Ink, wrote down the day, and then just, had my daily tasks that I could take on the go with me. And so that really worked out well for me. And I really enjoyed using that for a couple of months. And I'm actually going to be finishing the year off in this passport because December is quite busy as well, and the kids have a 2-week break at the end of December, and so we are doing a little bit of traveling during that time, and I just need something that I can have with me on the go, even around the house, or if we leave the house, just have something that I can grab. And I just feel like I have everything that I need with me. And so this notebook I used for a couple of months on and off, just when I kind of needed a little bit more daily planning, a little bit more space for during a day. And so because it's undated, it's just a notebook. I can use it again if I need to. That kind of brings us to the end of my lineup. I did want to mention the systems that I tried that didn't necessarily work out for me. So I think there's two that I had. So the first system is the Hobonichi Hon with the supplementary calendar or weekly calendar. And this is actually from 2024. I really loved this cover. And of course, the Tomoe River paper was actually not that bad in 2024. And so I got these, I got the 2024 Hon off Amazon when they were doing a sale. And so I spent very little on this. And I thought, what a great way of just reusing a cover and a book that I really liked. I only used this for 3 months. So you can kind of tell I used it until March and then fell off. And I think partly why is because I had my Hobonichi weeks, and I just felt like the weeks was what I really needed in terms of portability, but also being able to see overall what I needed to get done during a week. And having the notes pages for daily logging was really helpful as well. And so I just didn't really need this system anymore. But I do love that I can jump into this if I do need it. I just redated the date. So actually what I did was I whited out the day of the week, and then I just stamped what the actual day of the week was, and then just jotted down tasks and other things that happened during the day. So I did a little bit of rapid log journaling as well. And yeah, I think just over time, I just didn't use it as much. And so I didn't feel it necessary to have this in my lineup. So I just set it off to the side. And I think redating this in the future might be a possibility as well. Because I do really enjoy this cover. I do like the pages. And I think the paper really worked well. So that's that. The other, just disregard this because my daughter put this on here and it's really, really cute, but it's hard to take it off without ripping the cover. But this is the Take a Note A5 planner. And I got this just to experiment with the paper because it's 68 GSM Tomoe River paper. And I wanted to try out the paper. I wanted to try out the layout because it really intrigued me to have the sort of weekly overview or breakdown, but also 2 days on each page. So having the sort of vertical calendar look really interested me. But what happened was I initially started using it as a journal. And so I would write down, like projects that I wanted to get done for the week, and then just kind of my thoughts during the day. But I found that this book was too big for using as a journal. I just didn't, with all the other journals that I have, I just didn't turn to this book often enough. And so I fell off quite a bit. And then I thought, well, I could just rip out the pages, which is why it's in two. I ripped out the pages and I hole punched them and threw them into my plotter. And I actually used it maybe for a month or so that way, where I would write down projects or, daily sort of tasks. And then that way in my plotter, I had a monthly, weekly, and daily view. But I think it was too much. I just didn't really need this kind of view in my plotter. It's not that I didn't like this format or I didn't like this book. It's just, I think it was too much. I didn't really need it. And I didn't really turn to it. And so that also kind of fell off. But I do like the paper, and I feel like I could repurpose this, without the date, or redate it if I wanted to in the future. And then again, I can rip out these pages and throw them into my plotter just for note taking and other things. And so nothing's wasted, but it did sort of give me some learnings in terms of what works for me, what doesn't work for me, especially, at this time. So let's get into what are some of my learnings from this year that I'm taking into 2026. Some systems that worked, some that didn't, and why. And hopefully that kind of helps you as well to figure out, if you're in a similar situation or if you have similar thoughts about different systems, maybe that helps you kind of solidify your own lineup for next year. So for me, I found that paper was really important. And I think a lot of people found this in 2025 is with some of the inconsistencies and some papers just being a little bit disappointing. I think a lot more people were experimenting with paper, and I found that for me, I did kind of turn away from Tomoe River paper just to find alternatives so that, I'm not relying on TRP in my planners. And I found that I really did enjoy the Midori cream paper. And I know, Midori has notebooks and planners themselves. And they also make the inserts for Traveler's Notebook. So just kind of firming my love for, that kind of paper, being okay with using cream paper too, I think was a big sort of step that I took this year. The other thing I learned that I will move into 2026 with is that July and August planning just isn't the same for me. So I need to remember that even though I may use a planner from January to June, July and August are kind of the wild card for me. And so having something that's like a backup, smaller, portable, and that I can use, such as the Traveler's Notebook passport size, similar to this year, I think being open to that and not feeling bad about jumping away from, an A5 size planner, I think that's kind of a takeaway for me, is that I can adjust seasonally or monthly to my situation changing. And so being able to jump out of a bigger planner just for July and August, or maybe, other months throughout the year, and then being able to jump back into, my core sort of bigger planner, I think that's important for me. So I think the way I'm going to approach 2026, as just kind of a spoiler or a teaser, is that I'm going to look at it 6 months at a time. So for my 2026 lineup, I'm going to start by having a core lineup for January to June, and then adjusting for July and August, and then sort of moving into the last few months of the year, using the system that I want to continue with. And having that kind of no pressure look at my lineup is going to be important for me next year. One more thing I learned is that I like to reuse and repurpose notebooks or paper that I have available to me. And that's one thing I'm going to be definitely focusing on in 2026, is that I don't just want to buy a bunch of planners and notebooks to use them or to try them out. I do want to stick with the notebooks that have worked for me and that I find, don't annoy me. Especially when I'm using fountain pens for writing. So I'm going to simplify it that way. And then because I have a lot of unused paper and notebooks that I just haven't completed throughout the past couple of years, I'm going to try and repurpose some of that paper, especially if it's good paper, and use them that way. So that way I can sort of save money and not buy all net new notebooks, but also I can keep enjoying the paper that has, brought me joy in my planning and journaling. And then the last thing I think I've learned or really focused in on this year is the amount of books that I use in my lineup. And so again, for planning purposes, I think, the sweet spot is having 2 planners. One as sort of a catch-all A5 where I have a lot of space, and then the second one being sort of a daily nitty-gritty type of planner, especially one that I can sort of carry around with me if I have to, and I don't feel awkward, bringing out this big book just to write down a task, especially if I'm out of the house. So the 2 planners have worked really well for me. And then in terms of journals, I stick to about 5 of them. Again, because I have commitments in 5-year journals, so that's already a couple of books. And then the last 3, I kind of stick with stream of consciousness, journaling, which I really enjoy, as well as memory keeping, and having sort of a smaller size journal that I can carry around. And then having a book for memory keeping, or, Happy Mail, ephemera, and then as well, Hobbies. I really enjoyed having a space to document my love for fountain pens and other stationery, as well as reading books and things that are just kind of like my free time commitments, or things that I do on my free time. And so that's how I'm sort of approaching journaling, is a free space for me to be creative, to think, outside of just my usual routine, things that I need to get done. Journals are kind of that space for me to be free and be, enjoy my stationery and find some joy in the things that I like. So those are my planners and journals for 2025 that I used. Overall, there are 7 systems that really worked for me and kind of, kept me productive, organized, functional, but also other books and systems where I was able to be creative and enjoy my stationery and interests and hobbies. So some learnings as well that I'm going to be taking into 2026 with me. I hope that was useful or helpful in some way for you as well. At the very least, to kind of reflect back on what you used this year that works for you in your situation, and things that you can take into the next year with you. And I highly encourage, reusing and repurposing from your own stash if you have that, and to kind of reignite your love for stationery and remember why you got, certain notebooks, certain paper, and really finding out what you love that way. So if you have any questions, let me know. Also, let me know about your lineup. What did you really enjoy using this year? Let me know in the comments. And feel free to share what your lineup is for 2026 as well. My next video is going to be about my 2026 lineup, so I'll see you in that one. Until then, I'm Corolla. On socials, I'm @FromCorolla. I'll see you next time. Bye.